One of the cool things about retro gaming is that we are still seeing new content being created all these years later. From old games that have seen massive upgrades like Mortal Kombat Arcade Edition, to completely new experiences like Xenocrisis, the dedicated community that surrounds the hobby continues to keep us all entertained. In August of 2021, Neofit Technology decided they too would add their new game to the Sega Genesis lineup, Demons of Asteborg. I had actually intended to review this one back then, but after a few hours with it, it was clear that this was a much bigger game than I had anticipated, so I wanted to give it a lot more time to really come away with a complete opinion. Now that I feel I know the game front to back, it's finally time to take a look at it and see if it's any good. Before we begin, this was not a free review copy. I paid for the digital and physical versions with my own money, for both the Switch and Genesis. I will admit that I'm finding I am just not drawn to unlicensed physical cartridges of new games much these days. They aren't Sega branded, there are always questions about how the PCB is engineered, and I am not motivated by nostalgia from playing it as a kid. The convenience of just dropping the cheaper ROM option on my EverDrive or Mega SD is all I really need these days, so I feel this may be the last physical project like this that I support. I have no fancy media kit to show off for this one, so we are gonna jump right into Demons of Asteborg and see if it's worth your time. If you read a bit about this title, it's described as a mix of Castlevania, Ghouls and Ghosts, and even Space Harrier. Having played the demo a bit, I had an idea of what to expect from the base gameplay. You are Gareth, Royal Knight and one of the few people standing in the way of a complete demonic invasion. The evil Zatimus is out for revenge, and there are secrets yet for you to discover about your past. The mechanics of this one start out quite familiar to anyone that has played action platformers before. You have a standard 3-hit combo when grounded and can attack when you jump. At first this seems like all you can do, and the initial impression is that it's quite simple in its execution. But as you play more, things deepen up quite a bit. There is a very useful slide maneuver that allows you to bypass enemies without damage and avoid attacks. This momentary reprieve is vital to mastering the gameplay, and you would do well to make the most of it. You'll also find magic abilities that tie into the stages you are playing. For instance, on stage 1, you get a missile-style projectile that can be used for damage and is used to interact with objects. This type of strategic design then follows on every stage after. Basically, find your magic ability, get past the stage obstacles, and then fell a boss using the help of your new techniques. For example, your fire ability burns barriers, your airwalk allows you to easily get past bottomless pits, and your repulsor blast will propel rafts along the water. A magic meter governs the use of these powers and recharges on its own. While most games allow you to stockpile your newfound abilities for later use, you actually lose each one as soon as a new level begins here. This really bothered me at first because some of these powers were actually fairly useful. The developers never seem to really let you run wild with your upgrades and use them as you see fit. The more I played though, the more I appreciated the level design on which the powers are based. There is strength in its variety, and even though having them all at your command would have been preferable, I still found each one a fun and interesting mechanic for the short time I had it. It's also really important to note that the boss encounters are a huge part of the Demons of Asteborg experience. If you love long battles with nasty damage sponges, this is the adventure for you. These guys take a ton of hits and deal out tons of damage in the process. They have multiple life bars, and a few have invincibility forms that can only be dealt damage a certain way. Not all of them are hard, but a few will test your patience. Fortunately, there is a save system in place that keeps you on the level you leave off on. Checkpoints are also scattered around to help you should a death befall your hero. In between levels, you get to browse a store that uses the money you pick up from defeating enemies. Here you can buy more men, an extra life bar, faster magic replenishment, new moves, and a nuke attack that damages everything on the screen. To round out these features, there are multiple difficulties to choose, and there are areas where you take control of different characters. One thing I was really hoping for here was a game that really took advantage of the Genesis hardware. Indie games are often rather simple when it comes to visuals. These games are done by small teams on a limited budget. But the demo and pre-released footage had looked phenomenal, so my expectations were understandably high. I am happy to report that the developers at Neofid Technology really came through with this one, and it is a graphical stunner. This game is nearly 117 megabits of pure 16-bit goodness, and the animations for each and every character is top-notch stuff. Backgrounds can feature multiple layers of scrolling, and there are some pretty nifty special effects that mimic those from your favorite games like Mickey Mania and Ranger X. In fact, it's even more impressive here thanks to some really impressive color use that goes well beyond many similar games in the genre. It really maximizes the relatively small color palette available. There is also a ton of variety. No two levels look the same, and there are always new enemies introduced. This makes for an overall great looking title that easily rivals some of the better looking classics. Hell, there is even an entire section that is directly inspired by my favorite series of all time, and it makes me wonder what these guys could do with a Master of Darkness sequel. The only real weakness to this presentation is that once you get a taste of just how nice it can look, you can't help but feel disappointed when you go inside a cave or some other similarly drab and empty area. Where did all the layers go in the backgrounds? Where are the special effects? Once you establish a visually stunning experience, you really hunger for it the entire time. Even so, this is still an awesome looking Genesis game that shows off both what the hardware could do and how well these developers were able to harness it. Better yet, there is virtually no slowdown or performance hiccups to speak of. I felt slowdown once my entire playthrough, and it lasted about half a second. Considering what's on display here, I'd call that a big win for Sega fans. I am a fan of FM sound. While many love the samples that the Super Nintendo pumped out, nothing beat a good Genesis soundtrack to me. I'll take the music in Streets of Rage, Castlevania Bloodlines, Batman, or Midnight Resistance over anything offered by its rivals. That leaves me quite picky when it comes to the sound and music on the platform. Once again, I am happy to say I was quite satisfied with what we got here. Not every track is a masterpiece, but we have more good than bad, and there are even a few that stand out so strong it gives the gameplay some extra emotion that drives you to play harder. When a soundtrack can pull that off, it's done its job. Let's have a few examples so you can decide for yourselves. No game is perfect, and we do have some irritations here that I feel compelled to talk about. I mentioned that the powers go away after you finish the stages to which they're connected to. While I love the variety and how the levels were built around the magic you find, I would have much rather have kept them for the entire game, or at least until the big secret is revealed. There is also a considerable problem with the balance of the boss encounters. The second and third guys you face are the hardest in the entire game by a country mile. In fact, even after beating it twice, I still can't figure out how they damage me at times. These dudes just soak up damage and the battles go on forever. This is actually kind of funny, because some of the bosses afterwards die much easier and quicker, making you wonder why the hell the other ones were so freakishly difficult. The thing is, the life and magic upgrades in the store take a bit of money before you can afford them, so the challenge should have been in reverse. The early guys should have been much easier, and the later guys should have provided a challenge where the upgrades would have then really mattered. To be blunt here, I found pretty much everything in the store to be useless outside of the extra lives. The extra combo attack and downward thrust adds almost nothing that you need, and by the time you get the extra life bar and the magic upgrades, the game gets noticeably easier. To lessen its importance even further, that extra life bar you get can't be replenished, so collecting health is pointless while it's active. But please don't confuse these complaints as anything more than a list of things I would have liked to have seen done better, because overall, Demons of Asteborg is a winner start to finish. It's superbly animated, it has special effects worthy of gushing over, it plays well and has a ton of variety in its level design, it sounds good, and perhaps more important than anything else, after you finish it, you'll want to start up another game and try a harder difficulty. It has its areas that could have used some more refinement, but this just makes me more excited for part 2. Getting Genesis indie releases is nothing new these days, but getting an indie release at this level of quality is indeed something special. It's a combination of old-style game design with a touch of today's technology to give us a little bit of everything that made the Genesis platform so special. I honestly can't recommend it enough. To make things even more enticing, you have multiple options to own this. For the Genesis, you can pick up a physical cartridge, or you can score just the ROM so you can add it to your EverDrive or Mega SD. There were some questions brought up about the developer's choice of electronics for the cartridge, but they have responded strongly that their current build is safe and will not damage your system in any way. For those without Sega's platform, you can also get this for the Nintendo Switch and the PC via Steam. Both are under $20 and well worth the money. The developers at NeoFid also have a Genesis Kickstarter in development called Asteborg, which is a roguelike that appears to use a similar engine as the one displayed here. It too will be available on the Switch, PC, and Genesis. I really feel these projects are beginning to come together to offer us quality that is a cut above some of the indie developed stuff from a few years back. You put this up next to many of the better games for the Genesis, and it really holds its own. You can't say that about many small projects, and these developers have certainly done a good enough job to get my attention. I eagerly await their next game. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.